Learn Hibernate JPA in Spring Boot with MySQL. Step 1. Create a project with the dependencies required to use Hibernate JPA and MySQL. Go to a browser, type start.spring.io, hit enter. That's the Spring initializer. We can use the defaults for most of the fields, like a project, Maven project, language Java, Spring Boot, version 2.7.1. For project metadata, the group com.example is okay. And for the artifact, we want to set out the name as demo Hibernate. And then once we change that, the name is changed to demo Hibernate, and the package name also changed to com.example.demo Hibernate. And we packaging as jar and use Java version 17. Then we add dependencies. We want the project to handle HTTP requests, and we want the endpoint. So we add a web dependency, type web, then the Spring Web dependency. And please note, for Hibernate, we need to add two dependencies. One is the JPA and one is the database. So we click add and then type JPA. So this Spring Data JPA dependency we need to add, and then we need to add a database dependency. Since we are going to use MySQL, so type MySQL and click this dependency. Now we can click the generate button to create the base project. Spring Initializer created a lot of Hibernate setup and configure code in the base project. We can open the zip and close this, and we can drag the project folder to the desktop. Close the zip. Again, we use IntelliJ IDEA as the IDE, and we need Java JDK as well. If you have not installed the tool yet, I provided two links below this video in the description area. It's very easy to install both. Once we have IntelliJ, we can open the project by open this, double clicking the pom.xml file. Now the project is opened. Step 2. We need to configure Hibernate in application properties file. So we go to main resource applications. This is the file we need to configure. First, we need to set up the data source, and for the data source URL and the username and the password. For URL, we need to set it to JDBC column, and the database we are using MySQL, so use JDBC column MySQL. And since MySQL, the database is installed on a local machine, on my local machine, we use a local host. And the port number, when we installed the MySQL, the default port number is 3306, so we specify 3306 here. And we want to use our application database, the name as college, so we put database name at the end. By the way, if you have not installed MySQL, I provided the link on how to install MySQL below this video as well. Simple and easy. We need a database for Hibernate, and we use MySQL here. For the username, we use root, which is the default system account generated by MySQL installer during the installation. Of course, we can use other application account. The password here is the one we provided during MySQL installation. The purpose of Hibernate is to map a Java class to a database table. The database is normally created by the database admin outside of the application. So we can just go outside of IntelliJ and use the simple MySQL command line tool to create a database college. by default, MySQL is installed under this directory, C program files, MySQL, and we need to copy this MySQL server 8.0/bin and go to the Windows bottom left, search for a command line, type cmd and open a command prompt, and we can change it to the folder we just copied and to the bin directory, and then we can type MySQL -u, that means use the username, we use the root, and -p as the password. It prompts us for the password. We use the password ABC123 we specified and installed, we provided during the installation. Hit enter. So we logged into this MySQL server. We can use show databases to see the existing databases. So now we see MySQL, those are all the default stuff, and there are no application databases. So we create the database by type create database college. That's what we want, and make sure the semicolon. So that's all we need to create the database outside of IntelliJ. See, right now we can show databases. Now we see college, the application database we need is created successfully. Besides data source in this application properties file, to set up Hibernate, we also need to set up JPA and Hibernate. To do this, we need to add the few lines like this. We set the JPA show SQL equal to true, so we can show all the SQL queries on the console when we run it. And then we set Hibernate DDL auto equal to create. Hibernate then will recreate all the database tables every time when we run the application. Since we want to show how Hibernate can create and initialize the table values for us, we set it as create for now. Only the first time run the application. Please note that the last JPA Hibernate dialect parameter, MySQL 8 dialect. This number 8 matches the MySQL version, since the MySQL installed on my machine is version 8. If you installed a previous version, like version 5, then you should put a 5 here. Next step, to use Hibernate, we need to create an entity class. Like this. We go to Java, package, right click, say new, class. Let's say we want to create the class name as student for the college database. So we hit enter. And we want to provide ID, name, and email for each student. So we created field ID as long, name as string, email as string. We want Hibernate to map the class student to the database table. It's also called table student. How can we do that? To do that, we need to add some annotations like this. Okay, so first we need to make this class as entity class by add annotation add entity, and then we need to make the ID as key by add ID annotation, and make sure we want the ID to be generated by the Hibernate. We use add generated value strategy equal to generated type dot auto. We don't want this ID is null, so we want add a column nullable equal to false, and the updatable equal to false. Normally, for the Java class, we need to define constructors and getters and setters. To save the effort, we can use Lombok library annotations for Java, like all args constructor, no args constructor, add data. With these three annotations, we can automatically get all the needed constructors and getters and setters. We see the annotations for getter setters and for constructors are red. That's because we have not imported the Lombok library yet. To import, we have over here and hit Alt Shift Enter. Do the same thing. Alt Shift Enter. Alt Shift Enter. Okay, then we imported the Lombok annotations. Now let's see how Hibernate can map the entity class student to a database table. If you recall, we created the database college before, but it's empty, no tables. To make sure, let's first verify it. As before, let's go to the program files, MySQL Server 8.0 bin directory, and use MySQL-u root, use the root account and the prompt password. We type password, then we log into it. We first show databases. We see college here. Okay, so we use college. Use the command. Now we are using the college table, college database, and let's see if we have tables. Show tables. No tables. Empty set. It's empty. To say Hibernate can map the entity class student to the database table, in Spring Boot, it means when we run our application here, we should see Hibernate will generate a table student in the database college. Okay, let's run it. We go back to our application and click Run. Okay, it's running. The embedded Tomcat started on port 8080. Now let's check if a table is created by Hibernate. Go to prompt and we show the tables, same command. Remember, please note, it was an empty set. Now we run again. See, we generate the student table. Hibernate ORM, Object Relational Mapping, works here. But the table student is empty right now. Like if we use the SQL statement, select everything from student, you run, we see it's empty set right now. Can Spring Boot insert some initial values when we start the application? Yes, we can create an input.sql file under the resources folder like this. And the resources folder, say new, and file, and import.sql, create a file, and put in the SQL statement, insert into the student values, like two values, right? One is John Smith, and email is johnsmith@gmail.com, and the second record is Mary Brown, and mary.brown@gmail.com is the email. Once we do that, and we rerun this application again, now the application started, and let's go back to see if the student table has anything. So select. Now we see John Smith and Mary Brown, two records are selected from the student table, which is what Hibernate maps to Spring Boot mapped the two records from the input SQL file into the database table. With Hibernate in Spring Boot, we can create tables and generate initial values. More importantly, we can also do CRUD, create, read, update, and delete with the tables in MySQL database by using REST endpoints. To do the CRUD, we need to create a JPA repository interface for the persistence. To create the JPA repository interface, let's close this one first. And we need to right-click the package, the new, and Java class, and we need to type our JPA repository name. Let's say our student repository. We just say repo. Okay, very important. We need to select interface here. So select interface and hit enter. So now we generate the student repository class, and we need to extend it to JPA repository, right? And also very important, we need to with the arguments, the entity class name student, and the key type, which is the ID type, is long. Next, we need to create a request handler so we can allow users to use HTTP requests to access our database with Hibernate JPA repository interface, like the student repo we just created. In Spring Boot, we can create a REST controller for the HTTP request handler. We do that by right-click the package, say new class, and then we use the name as student controller. Hit enter. To make this class as a REST controller, we need to use the annotation add REST controller. We want to provide an endpoint to get all the student records in the database table, like John Smith and Mary Brown we inserted earlier. So for this, we need to create a method. Let's say get all method we want to create. Okay, so this is the method name, and we want to return a response entity type with the arguments list of student. We want Hibernate JPA to do everything for us, so we need to use the JPA repository student repo like this. We just declare the student repo repository object, and we use the annotation add auto wild. Please note, add auto wild here does the dependency injection. It makes developers' life a lot easier. So we can just specify this annotation for the JPA repository interface we just defined. We don't need to create the object for the class. Spring Boot handles all the creation connection details for us. Now we can get all the records by using the method findAll like this. The student repo has the method findAll, and it will return the list of students from the database and return as a list of student type. We don't even have to define the findAll method. In the student repo, the JPA repository, there is no method here. The Hibernate does it for us automatically. To convert the list object to JSON format, we use response entity. We do it like this. We insert the two records in student table earlier. Like this, we have two records already. So we don't want to recreate the table and reinsert. So in the properties file, we need to change this DDL auto, Hibernate DDL auto from create to update. To make this get all method to handle the HTTP GET request, we need to add the annotation add request mapping for the get all method. The request mapping path is /all. So if we run the application on local machine port 8080, then we should be able to use localhost 8080/all to get all the students. Now let's run the application. It's up. The server started on port 8080 locally. Now we go to a browser and type localhost colon 8080/all. See, we got the list of the students in JSON format. We got the first record John Smith and the second one Mary Brown. In summary, to use Hibernate in Spring Boot, first, dependencies. We need to add at least 2 dependencies, Spring Data JPA and a database dependency, like MySQL dependency. Then in application properties, data source, then JPA Hibernate setups. Then code, we need to create an entity class, and then a controller class, then an interface, JPA repository interface.